Today I wanted to show a bit of a more advanced tutorial because I haven't really seen it anywhere. And this is for collaborating with multiple people or just multiple computers on the same Black Ops 3 modding project. So basically, if you and your friends want to make a map together, in the past, the methods I've seen that people do to collaborate between their computers are pretty bad. They just involve passing lots of files around. But in software development, there's things called version control, which are built for this. And I haven't really seen any tutorials for version control being used for Black Ops 3 modding. So I wanted to make one because it's something I have used recently with a friend, and I thought it was way better. And if you are familiar with Git, that's what I'll be using. But if you're not, don't worry. I'm going to make this as simple as I can for using it. I would recommend you be familiar with Black Ops 3 modding first, though, before jumping into a collaborative project. But anyways, there's going to be two different ways you can do this. I'm going to show the first one, which I recommend, which involves uninstalling Black Ops 3 and the mod tools first. So this means that your Black Ops 3 root folder should be totally empty. This method I think is better for two reasons. For one, it makes the Git setup easier, which you'll see in this tutorial. But for two, if everyone uninstalls everything first, it helps make sure that everyone is on the exact same files. Whereas if you have people coming in with different things installed, different content in their root directory, there could lead to issues where someone is having something different appear on their machine. But anyways, let's get into it. For both of these, you're going to need Git, and I recommend GitHub Desktop, especially if you are unfamiliar with Git, because it makes it a lot easier to use. But yeah, I'll put these links in the description. Start by downloading Git. Now I'm going to install GitHub Desktop. The Git is kind of the underlying code that manages the version control, but GitHub Desktop gives us a really nice visual GUI for us to interact with. It's an optional thing, but it's very nice to have in my opinion. Oh, it looks like mine already installed very quickly because I already have it. You may need to go through more steps, including creating an account on GitHub if you haven't, because this is going to use that account. And you and anyone else collaborating will need to make an account on the website GitHub, but that should be pretty straightforward. All right, now that we have this installed and we have our Black Ops 3 and our Black Ops 3 mod tools uninstalled, we need to go to the root folder, which should be there if you previously had Black Ops 3 installed. For me, it is this file path. It's always going to be Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Call of Duty, Black Ops 3, but it might be in a different drive depending on where you install games on Steam. It shouldn't be too hard to find though. And what we're going to do is in our GitHub desktop, we're going to create a new repository. And I'll call this, actually you probably want to call this a repository associated with the name of whatever map you're going to be working on. So I'll just call this, I'll say that we're going to make a Black Ops 3 map about the sewers. It's going to take place in the sewers. So I'll call this Black Ops 3 sewer map. And then I'll make sure to, in the path selection, find my Black Ops 3 root. It should be this folder here. It should be empty is important. Otherwise, this will throw you an error. For the gitignore, I'm going to make my own gitignore, and I'll go into that later. And nothing else should matter. So let's hit create repository. Oh, that's unfortunate. It seems this actually created a folder inside the folder, which is not what I want. I wonder if I can move this out here instead and change this. So I'm going to change this to make sure it's pointing to this folder, the one that's called Call of Duty Black Ops 3. Okay, it seems that changes the name of the repository. Which is interesting, but the important part is we have our .git and .git attributes folder in here. The next thing we'll want to do is put in the gitignore. Now in the description, I've got a file which you can copy and put in here. It should be, what this is going to do is it will tell the Git what files it should be sending over to your teammates when you want to sync up and be on the same project. So we don't actually want to send every single file that's about to be put into this Call of Duty Black Ops 3 root, because there's way too many files in there, and importantly, it's full of big files that Git is not going to be able to handle pushing. Things like models and art and sounds are often too big to be sent. But what we can do is send scripts, we can send .map files, and we can send GDTs, and a lot of the important things that you're actually changing. And so what this file is going to do is it will dictate what files should be sent and what shouldn't. So I have this sample one, and you are probably going to need to adjust this. I'm gonna name it .gitignore. Let me copy all this text and put it in here and save. So let's see. Oh, I don't need these. I'll just explain briefly how this works. You don't need to understand it entirely, but it would be helpful too. The way this file is structured is, by default, it ignores every single file. That's what this asterisk does. But if we put an exclamation mark before and then the file or the file path, we're saying these are the exception. Actually push these files. So for instance, we're going to push this gitignore. And the rest of these are like map specific. So we will need to put in our map name where I wrote ZM example. But for now, since we don't even have the map, we can save this and go back to it later. So in our GitHub desktop, I'm going to go ahead and publish this repository to GitHub. Okay, here I can change the name. That's good. I'll call it Black Ops 3 Sewer Map. Okay, publish repository. So now the repository should exist if I go to GitHub in my profile. Let's see, repositories. There it is. So it's now on the website, which is good. That means it's not just on our computer. You can see it doesn't have any files in it yet though. So the way we do that is we create commits. For now, the only thing we'd be committing is that gitignore, but we can go ahead and do that. All right, commit to main. Now this shows there's one commit and we push it. If I refresh, we should be able to see there's a gitignore now, as well as the git attributes. Okay, so that's the basics of Git setup. Let's go ahead and install the actual game and mod tools. Now, obviously, this might take a while, depending on your internet. You want to make sure that it is, in fact, installing in this folder. If it's installing anywhere else, then it won't be sent with Git, as Git is only going to be tracking this folder where these files are. So we're going to install Black Ops 3, and then we're going to install Black Ops 3 mod tools. This is going to take a while, so I'm going to fast forward through this. Okay guys, I'm back now that Black Ops 3 as well as the mod tools have been fully installed. And we can see that if we look in our Black Ops 3 folder, it's been filled with these files and our launcher works. But we still have the Git files, importantly. We still have Git attributes and gitignore. So we're going to go ahead and create that new map that we're going to be sharing. And by the way, you can do this with a mod as well, or a multiplayer map. It doesn't have to be a zombies map, but that's what I'll be showing since that's the most common ZM mod level. I'm going to call it ZM sewer, since this is going to be a sewer map, or so I'm pretending. Make the new files. Now that we have a name and we've gotten some map files now for our default map, we can go ahead and fill out the gitignore to start sending some of these files over. So this gitignore that we put previously, we're going to take everywhere it says ZM example and replace that with our map name. Some of these won't do anything just yet, but Right now, all we have is the map source in that user maps folder. So this is going to be sending that over in Git. We can check if this worked by going to GitHub Desktop. As you can see, it updated. Now, if you don't know how this works, this is showing all the changed files that are being tracked. So like the gitignore I just changed by adding text to it. So that is shown here. But now it's also showing all these other new files that I've added to being tracked. So it'll send over the .map file, the CSC, the GSC, and some others. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and write a commit for this. So this is how you can kind of group your changes and stay organized, is after you make a certain amount of changes, you get to create a commit. In this case, I'll call it create new map ZM sewer, because right now it's just blank and all we've done is create the new map. I'll commit that. And importantly, if you want it to be able to be received by your friend or anyone else online, you need to hit push origin. And then we can see that reflected on the GitHub website if I refresh. There we go. So now all these files are being tracked on GitHub. So the next part, and this isn't really in a specific order, but I'll show you how to get this going on another computer or get your friend or whoever's collaborating. So if it's someone else, not yourself, just working on two computers, you're going to need them to make their own GitHub account. And the way you can let them work on this is on your repository in GitHub, go to collaborators. I'll ask you to confirm, and then you will add them here. You can type their GitHub username or their email, and you should be able to find them and add them, and then they'll get an email that they can click on to be added to this. If you're not working with anyone else and you're just doing this to work between multiple computers, then you don't need to worry about that. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and show you from the other computer how to get this repo on there now. On my other computer, and this would be on your other computer or your friend's computer, your collaborator. They're going to need to install Git and GitHub Desktop, just like I showed earlier. Then with Git, we'll open up GitHub Desktop actually, but we can go to the website as well. We'll find the repo. You can see it all here. Now, pardon, I have something else on here. What we need to do to get the repo onto a new computer for the first time, we do an action called a clone. So if you click on the little green code button, we can actually do the cloning easier through GitHub Desktop if you click on this while your GitHub Desktop is open. So we do that, allow. Okay, and it's going to automatically put in the URL. And we need to make sure that this local path is the Black Ops 3 modtools folder. So I've got it right here. We also need to make sure that it's empty. That's crucial. And importantly, we need that to be the very last folder. So as you can see, it automatically tacked on this extra, the name of the repo at the end, it was going to make an extra folder, but we don't actually want that because we want the repo to be this folder. So once we have all that, we'll hit clone. Okay. And now if we look in the folder, we can see we have the .git, the attributes, the gitignore, and we also have the stuff we had just pushed. So that's going to be some of the files for this map which have been pushed. It's important that we clone the git first because you cannot clone without doing something special but annoying into an empty folder. So now that we've cloned, though, we can do the next step, which is we need to install Black Ops 3 and the mod tools on this computer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And since that will take a while, I will be back once that is done. Okay, now that that is installed, both the Black Ops 3 and the mod tools on the second computer, we should be able to see in our root folder, everything is there, and our git stuff is still there as well. We should also see that we have the files that we had pushed earlier for the map. However, we actually do not have the full map. This is intentional because it would be redundant to push every single file that is created when you first make a map, because most of those files don't change, or if they do change, they're generated and not the kind of thing you want to be pushing over from Git. So what we're going to do is we're going to make that map, and we're going to make sure that we have the exact same name. It's interesting that it actually shows up here. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this first before remaking it. But I'm just going to make sure it's the exact same name as the map that was on the that we pushed. So ZM sewer. All right, it's back. Now we have some more files here, so we can actually run the whole map. While I'm on this computer, I'm going to show how you might push a change. Right now, we are pretty much good to go, actually, because we have the map on both computers as well as the Git repo on both computers. And the root directory, since we did a fresh install, should be exactly the same at this point on both computers. But now I'm going to show you just kind of how you might make a change to a map and push it. Radiant might take a little bit to load. I can show how you might make a script change first. Let's go in our map file. Oh, here's Radiant. Let me do script change first, though. In fact, I'll actually show, let's say you want to add a whole other GSC file, because if your map has lots of scripts, you might need to do that. You know, say we have a special trap in our map that we custom scripted, which I'll call sewage trap. This is a really gross map. So I made a new GSC file, copying the old one. I'm going to delete all this code. Just going to write some placeholder code. So I have a new GSC file, and then the way we would include that is we'd call it from our map file somewhere. Well, first we need to make sure we include it. So we'll do using sewage trap. Copy this line. And do our external function call here. Pardon me, we don't need all this. And call the main function. And then lastly, to include a new script, we need to include it in our zone file, which is also being tracked. So any changes we make to this zone file are also going to be sent over. And we should be able to see all these new things I'm doing reflected in GitHub Desktop. It added 3 new files here. So this is the file we just added, our new script. It shows everything that's in it. It shows that we made a change to the map name GSC here. It shows in green what we changed, as well as what we changed in the zone file. So at this point, I might, assuming the sewage trap is done, or at least in a stable state where I don't think it's going to break anything, if I were to send it to my friends, I would write a commit, add sewage trap, commit it, and push it. So now my friend on their other computer can fetch that, and then they will be able to see what I've added. Now before I show that, I want to also show how you might make a change to the map files in Radiant. It should be pretty simple. It's just doing what you normally do when you're editing maps. If I add some geo, like this square here, and then I save, it should reflect in here that the zmsewer.map file has been changed. Now, it's important that you recognize the .map files, at the end of the day, they are also just text files like everything else, and they're very hard to read. As you can see, some of the changes are like changing this long string. It made quite a lot of changes, as you can see. You can just keep scrolling. All we did was add a single brush. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because when using version control, if you're not careful, you can run into conflicts where, because it's different on one machine than the other, and if it doesn't have a clear way to resolve this, then you're going to have to do it manually. This is something you can do pretty easily with scripts, where you can just read it and you can see, oh, this line should be here, but it shouldn't delete this line, and you can just correct that and make the file. But for .map files, it's really hard to read something like this and figure out what text I need to keep versus not keep. So we want to be careful to avoid conflicts. This could happen because, say, on my end, I have this project and I added this. Actually, no. Let's say that since this pack-a-punch machine has already been in the map, it was already in the map on both machines. If one user on their machine decided to move it to the left a bit, and then they save, But on the other machine, someone decided, I want to move this to the right a bit. And they save. And then both people commit. Guess what's going to happen? There's going to be a conflict because Git is not going to know where the machine should be, because that's not something that can work at the same time, right? The pack-a-punch can't both be over here and over here. That can't be resolved. You'll have to pick one or the other. So obviously you'll need some communication with your teammates when you're both working on the map about, you should only be working on certain sections. Like you shouldn't work on the same areas of the map at the same time. You should make sure to commit and get everyone's commits before you start working on something. I bring this all up because some people might not use the prefab system very much in modding, which is fine if you're doing a map all by yourself. In theory, you can just kind of have everything in zmsewer.map and get away with it. But if you're collaborating with people and you have multiple people who are going to be doing mapping, they're adding, stuff to the map file, then it's crucial that you break things up into prefabs. So, for instance, I might want to break up the right side of the map from the left side of the map. I can do this. I could select everything. I'll count this as the right side of the map. This is a neat trick for selecting stuff inside. And then I might make a new prefab for that. Save selected as new prefab. And where should I save this? It's important that I save this file somewhere that it will be tracked. So let's look at our gitignore here. Where are we tracking map source? So we're tracking the actual map file specifically, but we're also tracking, and you can change this. This can be whatever you want. The important thing is that it's being tracked. Is the file path underscore prefab zm sewer. So if we want this to be tracked, which we do, then we should make that file. We need a folder for it. That's the same. And now we can make our prefab in here. Right side. We should be able to see that pop up. There we go. New file being tracked. And just a reminder that you can do nested prefabs. You can have them as deep as you want, and the more you have, the less likely you're going to run into conflicts, because if you're working on separate prefabs, then you won't have any issues. The issues are only going to come if two people are working inside the same prefab at the same time. So I could enter this prefab, and maybe I could add another one within it. We'll do just the perks section, something like that. So now we have another prefab. Okay. But yeah, if you aren't familiar with working in prefabs, it's not too hard, but it's important you do it if you're having multiple mappers. Now, if you're just working with a friend and that friend is only really scripting, you can maybe get away with it. I'd still recommend probably making at least one separate prefab, because the scripter might need to do some things in Radiant in order for their scripts to work. So they could maybe make a script specific prefab, would probably be how I'd do that. But if you have multiple mappers, you should definitely be splitting up the map into sections appropriately, just to avoid that risk of conflicts, because .map conflicts are not fun to deal with, and you're probably just going to have to pick one file or the other, which means someone's going to lose their work, which sucks. But yeah, okay, now that we did that, all right, map changes. This is another commit that I'm doing, and I'll push that as well. Okay, that's enough work on this computer. I'm gonna hop back onto the first one and we'll finish out this tutorial. Okay, I'm back on the other computer, the one I started with. On the GitHub here, you can see on the website it shows the changes, the ones I specifically wrote to add sewage trap, map changes, shows that there's been updates to these. You can see it's all being tracked on here. We still don't have it yet though. And remember that you don't get the changes automatically when your friend pushes them. You need to fetch the changes in order for them to show up on your machine. And through desktop, it's really easy. You just click on this button. It'll look for any changes, and if it finds some, it's going to show up with this little icon saying pull origin, and the number here is how many changes it's fetching. So we made 2 commits before, so if we pull, we'll get both of those commits on our end. Now, if we go in the map folder over here, you can see the sewage trap GSC did go over, so we can see that code. Same should be true of our radiant changes. But yeah, that's pretty much how you do it. There's some other files I put in here as an example of things that are small enough to share across Git that might be helpful. So for example, if you're making stuff in Ape and you have to make GDTs, you're welcome to share that through Git because GDTs are small files. You can also share CSVs. So for example, if you're making sound alias files, you might want to share that over Git. You can even share sounds, though if they're really big WAV files, that might be too much. You can see though, you can try. If it's short sounds like sound effects, I don't think there should be any problems with that. Our map pulled up over here. So we can see if the changes to the map applied. Yep, Pack-a-Punch is moved to the right, and that block is there. So we can see that we received the changes on our end here. So one last thing you might be thinking about is, well, what do I do if I am adding assets that can't be pushed, like model files with lots of textures and big sounds? For example, a lot of people like to go to DevRaw, is currently the website, and it has lots of things you might want to install in your map. But a lot of these things are going to have stuff that you don't want to be pushing over Git. So this is my recommendation. If you want to install something like a pack, you should download it. Actually, let me go back. I'll do it right now. Let's say we want Let's grab like these mystery boxes. Okay. I'm going to download this. While that downloads, I'm going to copy this download link. And what I'm going to do is in the root folder, or I can really put it anywhere as long as I track it. I'm just going to make a new file to keep track. I'm going to call it packages. You can call it whatever, packages.txt. And in this, I'm going to track what I've installed and what order I installed them in. So in this case, these are Harry's mystery boxes 2.0.2. And I'm going to put the link there as well, just to make sure we're downloading the exact same thing. And then I might add in more stuff as I download more stuff. I'm just going to download the one thing for now, though. And I'm going to make sure that this file, which I've called packages.txt and is in the root, I'm going to make sure that this is added to the gitignore. So show an example of adding something. We put the exclamation mark first, since it's the exception to the rule that is normally just ignoring everything. So this means we will not ignore packages.txt, and we don't need to put any file structures before that since it's in the root folder. And if I did that correctly, packages, should show up on our changes. So that means that we're going to be sharing this as well when we add changes to it. And basically, I'm going to install this now. You might need to do some different things depending on what you're installing, but in my experience, the vast majority of these packs follow the same exact format, which is just, it has a bunch of stuff you need to drag into your root folder. And then it has some things that you're going to need to put into your map specifically. So once this is done, then we'll install it in our map here. This just has scripts in the root folder. So this actually will be tracked. The scripts part in the user maps will be tracked, and we can see this, all these scripts that have been added, which is probably a good thing because there's a chance you might want to edit some of these. And it also means that everyone else will not have to change their user maps. But yeah, as you'll notice, we installed a ton of files in our root, all those like mystery box textures and models and sounds, but we didn't actually push any of that. Like the only thing that's being pushed right now is the scripts. And then the other stuff that will get pushed is these instructions will likely ask me to edit some of the scripts for our map, but this stuff is all stuff that's getting pushed. Anything that gets pushed means that we don't have to make someone else do it as well. Because if one person does it and pushes it, then everyone has those changes. So this is asking us to change our GSC and CSC. And then this is asking us to include it in our zone, which is pretty common. And we're tracking our zone file as well, which we had already edited earlier actually with that sewer trap. And it's asking us to change our sound zone config file, which is another very common one for these. And that's also being tracked. That's in no, not here, in sound, right here. So I'll do that. And asks us to place some stuff in Radiant, which we can do. I think I need to reload. Yeah, there we go. Can place in the new mystery boxes. So one from the Shadows of Evil. Not sure why the model isn't showing up yet. I think that might be a bug that should fix itself if you close and reopen Radiant. Anyways, I'll save the map. I'll go ahead and compile this. Should be pretty quick, since that was all that's needed to install it. Which that's pretty typical of these packs. You might have to do a little more. The important part, like I said, is anything you do that's tracked means no one else has to do it. And the way I have it set up is basically anything you do inside your map name folder in user maps is being tracked. So if you make those edits to, map name, CSC, GSC, zone, sound config, all that stuff, you only need to do that once. Now, what do you need to do on every machine is you need to drag in these folders into your root, because this stuff is not getting tracked. We're not tracking these models, but if you want this to work on everyone's machine, they need to install all these files into their root. So, and that's why we write it down in a file and in the same order, so everyone can see when they fetch something, they can see if there's been a new package, and you should let them know too. You can say, hey, I added Harry's mystery boxes. Make sure you install that after you fetch. And so after they fetch, they can go to the link that you've left them, so they know they have the same exact thing as you, and they can install it. I also wrote this as a numbered list as well, because it's important that they install stuff in the same order you did. In theory, some of these packages might replace files from the other packages. Now, whether or not that's a good thing and that works at all is just kind of up to if those packages work together normally. But in terms of just making sure everyone is on the same page, it's important that they do it in the same order. So if it works on one machine, it works on all of them. But yeah, there's not really a point in seeing this work. It's just the demonstration, but that's it. Now, I know I showed the most simple version of using Git, where everyone just has this button and they press it to fetch and pull, but in theory, if you know what you're doing, you can use Git as complicated as you want. You can create your own branches, stash files on it. You can make a proper repository where someone has to fork it in order to make changes, and that means people can't just push stuff, which you would do if you're doing a public map project and you want to make sure that strangers can't just disrupt your project. But for just working between people you trust, or if you're just yourself on multiple machines, this should work pretty well. And I do recommend learning more about Git, because it's a very valuable tool to learn if you're going to be developing any sort of software in the long run. Okay, so now real quick, I'm going to show the other way you can add a repository on Git without having to completely uninstall Black Ops 3 and the mod tools. This method is a bit more complicated because Git is not intended for you to start repositories in folders that already have files. But since we need our repo to be in the root folder, if everything is installed, then there's going to be files there. So I have here, I emptied out the Git repo. This is just a Black Ops 3 installation. I also removed the repo from GitHub, so we're starting from scratch, but with the Black Ops 3 and the mod tools installed. The way you're going to want to do this is not through GitHub Desktop at first. You're going to have to use actual Git on the command line. What I use is git bash. Pull up here. It's just a simple command line. And this is on the computer that is going to start the repo. So this is computer 1 here. You're going to need to change the directory to be this folder. So that's CD. I'm going to put a quotation mark here. And now I'm going to copy this whole file path to our root. Paste it. And then put another quotation mark at the end. If it works correctly, it should show that it's in this directory now, has this little yellow text at the end. And now we simply type git init as our command for creating a new repository. And you'll see that generated this .git file. We still want to have our gitignore though, which it did not generate, so we should make that. And you can copy the file that I have in the description. I'm just going to use the same one as I used for the other. So this is like a sample gitignore for mod tools. I'm not going to go into it. Now we don't have to keep using the git command line, thankfully. Now that there is a repo here, we can use GitHub Desktop and add it to here. So we do add local repository, and then we browse to the root folder and select the root and hit add. And if it works, it should show this repository, the file we have, and we can we can go ahead and commit this gitignore. And then we can publish this. And this is just like before, so I could call it sewer map or whatever. Publish it. I actually don't think the gitignore, yeah, it's using ZM example. So I still have the sewer map in the files just to show that this is tracking the files. These aren't important. There we go. We can see it's pushing our map files all the same as the other method was. I'll go ahead and commit and push this stuff. And on GitHub, we should be able to see a repository. There it is. Okay, now I'm going to show you if your friend has folders because they don't want to delete their whole installation, how they can get this repo onto their computer, because it is also not as simple if you're on that end. So I'm going to hop over to the other computer real quick. Okay, so now I'm on the other computer, and this is going to be a bit more complicated if you want to get a repo inside a folder that has files in it. I have the steps listed down here because this took me some trial and error to figure out exactly how to do. We're going to use git bash just like before. We're going to cd into the root directory. And then we're actually going to git init like before, which might seem weird because it's normally used for creating a new repository. But we're actually going to use this to get the other repository on this computer. The way we do that is with git remote add origin, and we need to grab the actual GitHub URL. So we need to go to github.com, find that repo that I made, and then we can grab it here in this code button, copy the URL. So we're going to type that. Enter. It should work if there's no error messages like this. And then we do git fetch. All right, we know it worked if it gives messages like this where it is getting the objects and it created a new branch for this computer, which is exactly what we need. And now lastly, we need to do git checkout -t-f, the name of our branch here, which is origin master. All right, now it's set up to track. And now we should be able to add it from GitHub desktop, just like before. If we browse and find the repository. And there we go. That worked. So we have our gitignore actually got pulled from over there, as well as the sewer map and any changes that I made to that. So we should be good to go. Now it's just like everything else in the tutorial. But yeah, that's how you do it if you want to not have to uninstall and reinstall, because I know that is a very big download. I do still recommend that because it makes sure that everyone has the same exact starting point with their root directories if this folder is empty at the start. But you can do this too to avoid that. Just be careful that you don't have conflicting packages and different raw files here that it might be pulling from, because you might get an error on your machine, but other people on the same project, same exact branch, won't get that error, and maybe that's because of something you had in your folder to start with. But if you know what you're doing, you can certainly get away with this.